When one of my subs requested me to review this episode, which is a Mr. Hellerman episode, they also changed their mind for me to review another cheese episode. But to be perfectly honest, this episode alone has been in my mind for a while, and I tried to understand the mindset of what they're doing with Mr. Hellerman most of the time. But this episode alone is a prime example that they just don't even know what to do with Mr. Hellerman whatsoever. This episode expects me to believe that if Foster's doesn't have the real Mr. Hellerman, life would be terrible. In all honesty, I understand that real life consequences exist for a reason when it comes to bills, taxes, and all that kind of stuff. However, for how the characters are portrayed in this show, and I do mean the characters that we're supposed to root for, it really sums up a lot onto why this is one of the most overrated episodes throughout the entire show. Frankie and the others can't stand Mr. Hellerman's strict rules and other things that cause them to get really irritated and really scared in case something happens. Mainly the image I showed you before, well, Blue was almost getting taken away only for Mac to return at the last minute. Okay, not really last minute, but he was a little too late in order to save Blue. So in order to restore freedom in Foster's, if there ever was freedom, they ordered Blue to take Mr. Hellerman to different places in order to show him what fun really is. Now, this may be shocking to think, but the sequence of Blue taking Mr. Hellerman to different places and Mr. Hellerman always takes everything seriously, I can somewhat relate to him. This would have been the best scene in the entire episode if the rest of the episode can showcase Mr. Hellerman's character. And the thing is, out of all the episodes I've seen Mr. Hellerman, especially the election episodes where Frankie and Mr. Hellerman and Blue are dealing with becoming president in Foster's by trying to lift up some restrictions, I can instantly forgive this episode despite taking similarities from that episode. Because as far as I'm concerned, this montage alone really shows that there was some kind of development involving Mr. Hellerman onto why he takes things seriously. But the thing is, in this episode, after this montage, Mr. Hellerman isn't being treated well whatsoever, because once he turns into the total opposite of himself, he can't be able to think clearly. And I'm being serious. And it leads to Foster's falling apart. You know, I understand that there are not a lot of employees working at Foster's because, well, to be honest with you, it's difficult for employees to take care of imaginary friends when Frankie is literally the only one. But the issue is that if you're telling me that Mr. Hellerman is mostly responsible of keeping everything intact, all the while that Frankie could have done the same, which was showcased in the election episode, then you're not giving me a good example of how serious the situation is. Like, it's really, really weird to think that Frankie can be able to handle this in the election episode because she can't stand Mr. Hellerman's strict rules, and now that she's dealing with this, all because Mr. Hellerman isn't thinking straightly, then I don't even know which character to root for. You can't just throw all this in the audience's face and expect it to work out. And when the characters try to turn Mr. Hellerman back to normal, it's honestly lazy. Here's the thing, I understand that these characters don't have experience much outside of the building. I mean, granted, this is the final episode of season 5, and those should have some kind of experience, but at the same time, it's really irritating for them to just take the cocky route rather than just doing something interesting. This is one of the reasons why I do not like the characters completely in this show, mainly for how they're portrayed. Like, I understand that you can't judge these characters completely, but at the same time, the good episodes that they appear in are instantly overshadowed by bad episodes. While this episode isn't overshadowing the positives that they did, it doesn't change the fact that they're not being used right. It's really, really lazy whenever they just completely put these characters in these scenarios and expect the audience to go along with it. And if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I do not like cool Mr. Hellman, because he is completely oblivious of what's happening in front of him. He doesn't listen to reason, and the only reason onto why he got into being cool is because he saw Blue being humiliated. You know, it's one thing to see the humiliation of a character you can't stand, but if that's literally all that takes for Mr. Hellman to go cool rather than being strict, then you can't expect me that this character is realistic. Because what he really enjoys is doing strict things. He may be an imaginary friend, but that doesn't change the fact that what he's causing in the first 5 minutes of this episode and the majority of the episode and then he turns back to normal at the end, the entire episode is just a waste of time. Here's the thing. Morals in these episodes or shows doesn't work if the characters won't back it up. Like, I would try to sympathize the characters a lot more if they're not two-dimensional, and nearly the bad episodes I've seen involving these characters are always two-dimensional and sometimes one-dimensional. If you don't have anything to back up the moral values, mainly the characters, then you've lost me. And this episode is a prime example onto why I don't enjoy Fosters as much as other people do. And the fact that there are more bad episodes that I have yet to talk about, not including the Cheese Aliens episode, then it really shows that this show has really aged that poorly over time. Look, it's one thing to look at the positives, but when I do that, the negatives are always in the way, and whenever I look at episodes like this, nothing's taken seriously, even when it's shoved in our throats. This is something that really bugs me whenever I look into this show, is that whenever it doesn't take itself seriously, it can do whatever it wants, and episodes like this is a prime example. At this point, the moral values from this show is honestly difficult to take itself seriously compared to modern shows right now. Granted, this show is better than Velma, in fact miles ahead of Velma, but at the same time, it doesn't change the fact that nearly every single character in this show has becoming a lot more problematic over time. I know I'm going overboard with this, but in all honesty, knowing full well that the Destination Imagination film comes out later in 2008, while this episode came out in earlier of that year, it really feels like that they just didn't know how to fill in the episode slots or try to come up with newer ideas, so they had to do what they got. And in all honesty, the fact that each season has 13 episodes is honestly unbelievable to think that they're having this difficult of a time of writing an episode, and we ended up with this instead. Bottom line, Let Your Hair Down is lifeless. Just like the later seasons of The Loud House. And in all honesty, it's really difficult to think that I've come to a conclusion that some of these cartoons are becoming a lot more lifeless the more I think about these episodes. I would get into more bad episodes that I have yet to talk about from this show, but there are other bad episodes from other shows in the meantime. So, I'm giving this episode a 3.75 out of 10. Only time will tell whenever I talk about the episode where Mac is being bullied on, everyone calling him a nerd. Because let me tell you, the Loud House did it a much more better scenario.